Hello everybody and welcome to week 5 of our Screen Reader Savvy class. This week we're going to take a look at how to do some more advanced editing, things like headings and footers and word counts and things like that that your students are going to need to know. We're also going to take a look at some screen tips and defining what those are. So that's the first thing on our list, so let's go ahead and get started. Why didn't anybody tell me about this sooner? Um, yeah, I know, right? So when accessing menus with the Alt key, not always the mouse, you're going to notice that there are small boxes with letters. These are called screen tips. The small boxes are black with the white letter on them, and they're positioned physically where you would tell your students where you would normally, I guess, click with a mouse to do something. So they're physically positioned in ways that will help guide an instructor visually on what to tell the student to do next. They give you a clue, a visual cue about what key combinations you should enter to do certain things, but they also remind you as a teacher what to tell your student to press next. So chances are when your student is doing something, you're sitting there looking over their shoulder and telling them what to do next. They probably think you're super smart because you have everything memorized, unless their screen reader is announcing the key tips as well. They're probably wondering how you know all this stuff, and really what you're doing is reading off the screen. Anyway, your screen reader has settings that allow it to announce the screen tips as you tab through the options on the ribbons. You want to make sure that your screen reader settings, as we talked about in weeks 2 and 3, whichever screen reader you're using, you want to make sure that those are turned on. If your screen tips in Word are also turned on, that will kind of help you as a screen reader user be able to see what's coming up. And we talked about that as far as like a lot of times they call them tutor messages and things like that in the screen reader settings, not necessarily screen tips. So that should help you put that together. Here's an example. It says example 1, but this is really the only example I put in here. So step 1, if you do an Alt, you'll see the screen tips for each one of the major ribbon areas. And you would do an Alt H to go to the home ribbon. And if you wanted to insert that numbered list, you're going to type a letter N. As you can see, the letter N is physically positioned over the icon that shows a numbered list visually. At that point, once you hit the N, you're going to use a tab to navigate the numbering options and then press Enter to select the one you want. So eventually, if you use this option a lot, all you're going to need to do is do the Alt H, N for numbered list, and then tab rather than kind of have to visually follow the cues or even auditorily through your screen reader follow the cues. If this is something you do often, then you should have it, it should be like ingrained into your memory and even in your muscle memory if you do it enough. I would really encourage you at this point to kind of practice using those key tips. And I know that you're going to have your screen reader on when you do it. You don't have to, though. The screen reader has its own settings, like we talked about for tutor messages. But with key tips, those work whether or not your screen reader is running. So that's kind of cool. That's sort of a Microsoft thing that they do. So you can practice those with or without your screen reader on. The real key is just so that you know what to do to make them show up and how to follow them through. Advanced editing. Headers they can be kind of tricky for some students because really if you're adding a heading, it's not going to always be showing up when you're reading your document. It's kind of like you have to be in there. Your screen reader cursor has to be within that heading in order to read it. So even after it's added, sometimes a student kind of is like, well, where's the heading? And it's because it doesn't always read if the screen reader cursor isn't directly in there. Anyway, there's key commands to enter headings. So to add one, you're going to do an Alt-N followed by H for insert and heading. Use your up and down arrows or the tab to choose whatever format you want for your heading. And um, sometimes that might be a little tricky. You might have to do some trial and error to what ones work the best for you and press enter on the one that works. You're going to exit the header to work in your document body after you're done, playing with the header with an Alt plus J followed by C. So you want to remember to exit the header. You have to exit the header in order to work in the rest of your document body. That's where you would, as a mouse user, kind of click out of the heading. This is how click out of the heading works. If you have a header inserted already, you can do an Alt-N followed by H to modify it. Modify your heading as you want, change whatever you need to, and then you're going to want to exit back to your document with an Alt-J followed by the letter C, the same way as you would above. There's a link on this slide in the Google folder that has some great information on it. It's actually quite good. So I would recommend following this link here on this slide. If you need it in another format, let me know and I'll email it to you. As you can see, adding a footer is very similar. You're going to do an Alt-N followed by the letter F. Use the up and down arrows to choose the format of your footer and then press enter. Just like the header, you're going to need to deliberately exit the footer to work in your document body with an Alt-J followed by the letter C. And the same thing for editing a footer. You're going to do the Alt-N followed by the letter F, modify your footer as desired, and then exit back to your document in the same way with the Alt plus J followed by the letter C. Just like on the previous slide, there is an article that has some great information. There's a link on the bottom of this slide, and if you need it, again, just let me know, and I will send you the actual link. Here's a section on inserting a heading into your document. Headings are actually quite helpful, especially when it comes to longer documents or articles or things that you are eventually going to put on the web. So adding a heading is really important. It's different than a header. A heading is just a navigable item, and when you put your screen reader in browse mode in a Microsoft Word document, you can navigate by heading. So again, helpful for longer documents, and they can be used with the screen reader in browse mode. Anyway, so to add a heading, you're going to do an Alt plus the letter H for home, and followed by the letter L, and that will take you to the styles area. Use the tab key to navigate to the style that you want to add. And once your style is added, you may type your heading, but note that once you press the enter key, anything that you type will be in the default style set. And that just means that your heading is going to be whatever you type on that one line, and once you hit enter, all bets are off. You're right back into the normal style set. That's actually to your advantage because you don't need to change back manually. As you navigate your document with either JAWS or NVDA, it will tell you when you're focused on a heading, whether or not you're in browse mode. So it's important to know that you're going to need to be listening for that. You can add headings at various levels. Heading 1, level 1 being a heading at the first level, heading 2 being a heading that is like a subheading to level 1, having heading level 3, which is a subheading to level 2, which is also a subheading to level 1. Think of them as Russian nesting dolls in a way, because each level gets a little smaller and more specific. Just like in those textbooks that you had when you were a kid and your teacher would tell you, oh, look, here's the main idea, and then maybe the second heading is like a sub-main idea, and the third heading in that textbook is going to be like a more targeted subject. So it's the same way with headings. You can check your word count. There are a couple of ways to do it. A lot of teachers give assignments like write 500 words on, A, B, and C, or I don't want to see any more than 300 words on this topic. So there are ways to find your word count. The first way is to type the F6 key until you hear the word status bar. The status bar in your Microsoft document is going to be running on the very bottom of your screen, along the bottom, kind of like a ruler, and it's almost if you think about it, kind of positioned where you would have your taskbar in Windows, but if you are in Microsoft Word, it is that lower, very small strip at the bottom. It should only appear if you're in the body of your document. If you press the Tab key until you hear word count, it will, well, tell you the word count. To return to the editing the document, you're going to press F6 twice or Shift F6 one time, or you can just hit Escape. Any one of those things will take you right back to your document where you were. So this is navigating through the word count without having Microsoft open a dialog box. This is taking you to that status line at the bottom. The second method, you would use an Alt-R to navigate to the Review tab, and then the letter W to open the word count dialog box that we are going to show below. Press NVDA plus B or JAWS plus B or your modifier plus B, which should all be the same thing, to read the dialog box aloud. And to return to editing the document, just use Escape to get out of the dialog box. As you can see, and below here is where this word count dialog box is, the second method shows you more information about the word count, including the number of characters, paragraphs, and lines. In the description here, I have the first verse of the Star Spangled Banner, and then I ran a word count on it. And it's giving me all of that information. It's showing me that I have 1 pages, 86 words, and then so on, 402 characters without spaces, and then it tells me the number with spaces. It tells me the number of paragraphs, which is counting as 9, and the number of lines, which is counting as 10. You can use a checkbox there to include or exclude headers and footers from the count. So that gives you a lot more information about what you're typing. It's certainly much more helpful as far as that goes if you need a little bit more information. That was a relatively short topic, but in my mind, it covers more information. So I would spend some time practicing your screen tips, practicing adding and editing headers and footers, and the same with adding a header and checking out the word count. I'm especially fond of finding passages or typing passages and trying to do all of those things, especially the word count, just to see which way you prefer and which way makes the most sense to you and your students. So, as always, if you have questions, please bring them to class on Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you all then.